I am back again, but this time to talk about something very different. Commanders. To my left, I have two guys from the design team, Jan van de Krabben and David Petrie. To my right, returning, Rob Farrow. Commanders, a big feature in Total War Arena, and we're here today to discuss that fact. So I think the opening question should be simply, guys, what is a commander? What's their purpose in Total War Arena?
The commander determines your playstyle. So even though you might be taking the same troops into battle that you've taken with a different commander, because each commander has a set of 3 abilities, or each of which are different, that will greatly influence how you're going to use your units in battle, whether you play more offensively, more defensively, whether you're more support. That's basically how each commander will offer you a new look and a new angle and a new play style with every type of unit, really.
Yeah, they're quite empowering as well, right? They're captivating. They're legends of that kind of era, right? Each one has kind of a very unique look and feel, and especially in our game, they play very differently as well. They have different roles on the battlefield, and if you get a collection of different types, it can really kind of make them battlefields really kind of come alive.
So the commanders all from the same faction, let's say that the Romans, for example, they have different commanders. Each commander has the same units. They have access to the same units, but they have different abilities. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so there's a different set. There are different sets of units that certain commanders may be more aligned towards. Some will work really well with a very specific unit types. Others are slightly broader. You know, they might work okay with some. For example, I think Caesar's a decent example in the Roman tree. He works really, really well with missile units and with artillery, but he also is actually pretty competent with infantry. You just have to kind of realize a way to play him. Obviously, the way you play that infantry unit would be very different to how you would play it with Germanicus, who's really like a heavy-hitting melee person. Caesar would have to play more support in that role, but he still can go up to the front line and hang around and sort of make the right push at the right time with that unit.
And the abilities that we choose for each commander are somewhat based in history as well. So, for example, Caesar is somebody who is great at maneuvering, at using his tactics and positioning to his advantage, which obviously is something he showed with excellence both in Gaul and in the Roman Civil War. But then you have somebody like Scipio, who very much worked on speed of reaction, did the Battle of Zama, also about adaptability.
You don't start off with these 3 abilities that make them epic, right? Or do their abilities change over time? Or do they start with just 1 or none? And like, how does this progression work?
So the progression, obviously, as you said, doesn't give you everything at the start. So what we did, we tried to balance kind of interestingness with ease of use. So when you start at the game, you kind of get the bread and butter ability of that commander, something that you can use in many situations, something that's pretty obvious how to use it. And then as you level up at tier 3, you get the second commander ability in, which usually is something slightly more complex that requires a bit more thought or tactics. And then at tier 6, you get kind of the top level ability that is the absolute signature. It's also usually the strongest ability of that commander. Then as you continue leveling up to tier 10, you can, along the line, starting at tier 1, you can unlock little talents that boost each ability. So each ability itself has like a little talent tree with which you can boost and modify that ability so that your Caesar won't be the same as my Caesar, and maybe your Caesar is a bit stronger in one way and my Caesar is stronger in another way.
So the talent trees, you can't max them out. So everyone, when they get to the final level, won't have all the talents. Is that what?
Well,
that
when you're at tier 10, you will not have maxed it out. So you can continue playing beyond that. And at some point, you will max it out.
You will be able to max it out.
But it will take you a long time.
Customizing the 100 Caesars on the battlefield, how do you make yours look, unique or feel unique on the battlefield. There's 10 guys per side. Let's say you got 3 Caesars on yours and 4 Caesars on their team. How do you know which one is yours apart from the highlight? Is there a way to make your guy look better?
At the moment, the only way to look at it is by your unit, right? And the way that the UI is set out. And we have investigated in different ways. Like originally we had like a way of colorizing and looking at that, customizing later on. We might be able to add some additional things to make your commander feel very unique. I don't really want to go into details too much about that at the moment. But we've definitely heard a lot of feedback about, customizing. That's one of the reasons why we did the talent tree. There is always options open to kind of work out how we make that more unique to you. But I think that's one of those things that we want to think about.
Are you telling me I'm not going to be able to put bunny ears on my Caesar?
I'm not saying that you can't. I'm saying not at this stage, but watch the space.
When and if you can, they'll be the best bunny ears.
Yeah,
so they'll be the most authentic bunny ears you've ever seen on a Caesar.
How does this work with the units? So, for example, you've got your Caesar. He's level 5 or tier 5, sorry. And you've also got tier 5 spearmen and archers. And then you switch to another commander. Are you back down to tier 1 in your spearmen? Or like, how does the relationship between the commander and the units work per nation?
Yeah. So the commander limits what tier you can take into battle in terms of units. So if your commander is tier 5, you can take up to tier 5 units into the battle, even if you've already unlocked with another commander higher tier units.
How is, I don't know if this is the right time to mention this, but you've got a commander who's level 10 and it's your only command. You would stir up the tree all the way to level 10 and then you switch to a new one. What's the matchmaker going to think about that? Are you playing against other people who've also got tier 10 commanders, or are you facing absolute newbies? You're able to just crush them with your experience and your maxed out units. Like, how's that going to work?
So the matchmaking does take your experience into account. It also kind of protects newbies from high-tier players. This is currently, in the current playtest that we're running with, very limited playtest we're running with our players, is currently turned off simply because we want to get as many players together into one group to play. But as soon as we open up the game to the wider world, we will put these protections back into place. Because obviously we do not want players to kind of just jump in and bash some newbies.
Because a high-level spearman group who've got the extra weapons and stuff will just be better in general than the other groups, right?
Well, if you come in with high-level spearmen, for example, you will be matched with other high-level spearmen. But the one thing that you can do is you can take a high-tier commander, equip him with low-tier units, and then enter matchmaking. And so what our matchmaking then does is it kind of looks at your units, but it also looks at your commander. And so, for example, if you take a tier 10 commander into battle with tier 1 units, you'll probably end up at tier 3 or 4.
Actually, my next question was going to be about that, experts versus newbies, right? I'm a micromanagement master. I used to be able to control 40 units in the past Total War games, and I can adjust them and control them all perfectly. That skill cap isn't there in this title. It's too simple. What do you say to those players who wanted that big experience versus the newbies who are like, 3's too much. I can't even control those. I always forget about that extra unit over there. 1 would be fine.
The granularity of control that you have in Total War Arena is so much higher than in the previous titles. And you need to micromanage. Yeah. Whereas in our other titles, all the units, actually I think every single man in every single unit has a bit of a mini AI. So they kind of go around and try to figure out what's best in this situation. In Total War Arena, the men do exactly what you tell them to, and nothing else.
Which is critical for a multiplayer game, right? This is a competitive multiplayer game. So the fact that the units do exactly what you tell them is really important, and so yeah, it's very important that does happen, right?
And also the combat resolution, the speed of movement is so much slower in the large-scale battles that we have in our other games, whereas in Total War Arena, the pace is so much faster. When you're engaged in battle, your units react instantly, they move faster, they turn faster, combat is resolved faster. So it's a very different gameplay experience that requires much more immediate second-to-second gameplay skills while keeping an overview of the grand strategy of your team.
And it is a different game. It keeps the core of what Total War is about, these epic scale battles and this kind of management of warfare. But at the same time, it just had something different. It's a very different type of game. And concentrating on those 3 units and kind of how you manage those 3, especially when you have to think about that commander in your unit as well and protecting that commander. And like Dave said, you know, sometimes you have to push forward because that's how you get the best out of that commander. And that working that out and playing around with that is really vital.
And that's all the time I've got for today. I feel like I'm going to be kicked out and I've stolen too much of their time. So thank you guys for everything you've told me here today. And I'll see you hopefully on the Battlehood soon.